Just to kind of orient you as to where we are, behind me is the Capitol building. They are heading in the direction of the White House, which of course has been ground zero for the protests here in Washington over the past week. They've installed these large fences really surrounding all of Capitol Hill, creating what amounts to a green zone in the middle of the nation's capital. Why should any lawmaker work with you and trust anything you say? Where did the 700,000 come from? Rank and file Republicans within Congress, many of those new freshmen that are calling for him to resign. But you see Elise Stefanik wanting to let it play out, wanting to see how this all proceeds, and basically telling me that, look, he was a duly elected congressman. You would be a no still on Biff right now? Have you chosen ambition over your values?
I've chosen my values and I've chosen my constituents.
Is that something you'd even entertain?
No.
No desire to be president?
My focus right now is doing the best job that I can.
One area where the two leaders may agree to disagree, if they even bring up the topic at all during their meeting here at the Vatican, is abortion. Whereas Pope Francis continues the Catholic tradition of calling it murder, Biden publicly advocates for access. The states that they are raising objections to are solely states that Trump lost. Rules were changed by other means in other states, including North Carolina, for example, which Donald Trump won. But lawmakers aren't raising objections about North Carolina, for example. Foster says her guiding light as a photographer is celebrating the person who is in front of the lens. This shoot was no different. Now, this ruling has also prompted renewed calls from progressives within the New York congressional delegation, including Congressman Jerry Nadler, to expand the court, adding additional justices to try to, in their view, balance out this current 6-3 majority. This is a sign that is sitting right next to one of these flattened homes. It reads, "Yes, we need help. God bless America." And so that begs the question, what happens to these families now? Who will help them? This is not the first time a North Carolina state gobbler has been spared the oven courtesy of the President of the United States. The last time was back in 2009. This tradition of pardoning turkeys, by the way, dates back to the George H.W. Bush era. It was a bit of a game of cat and mouse today. I spent a lot of my morning outside of his closed, locked office. Eventually, he did show up down the hall, saw all of the press that was standing there, turned around, disappeared. We chased after him, couldn't find him again for a few hours. Then he reemerged outside, walking over to the Capitol for the start of the new Congress, and that's when we caught up with him. George Santos silent as he faced the Washington press corps.
Do you have any remorse, any apology for them, sir?
The New Yorker arriving on Capitol Hill for the start of the new Congress, while embroiled in a growing scandal that now stretches overseas. Revelations mounting about lies he told concerning his work experience, education, and even his faith, with investigators at the local, state, and federal level, and now in Brazil, looking into the Republican. The New York Times reporting that law enforcement authorities in Brazil intend to revive fraud charges against Santos, stemming from an incident 15 years ago involving a stolen checkbook. Incoming New York Republicans we spoke with urged Santos to cooperate with investigators.
George Santos has disappointed me. The breadth of his dishonesty is very troubling.
This is an embarrassment. It's a distraction. And it's something that he needs to face with a soberness and a seriousness.
Notably quiet so far, however, House Republican leaders, including upstate New York Congresswoman and Republican Conference Chair Elise Stefanik, who endorsed Santos. Incoming Democrat Dan Goldman of Brooklyn and Manhattan, a former federal prosecutor, saying this.
So I think the fact that they have not condemned it demonstrates that George Santos is right at the core of this Republican Party.
Now, the one thing Santos did tell reporters today is that he intended to vote for Kevin McCarthy, no matter how many rounds it took for a speaker to be selected. And given how those votes played out today, it's certainly clear that McCarthy needs any supporter he can find on the House floor. Errol? There's no shortage of sights and sounds at the Franklin County Fair, from the rides to the livestock competitions. Beef farmer Jack Tierney has lived in the town of Malone near the Canadian border since the 1970s and has high praise for his congresswoman.
I think Congresswoman Stefanik is fantastic. I could use 10 more just like her.
But he was not always so eager to offer a ringing endorsement, especially when she was first elected.
I can remember calling her office and saying, we don't need a Republican that's going to act like a Democrat. We need a true conservative, and we don't need wishy-washy or rhino Republicans.
One of the reasons he likes Representative Elise Stefanik now, he says, her willingness to defend former President Donald Trump. When Trump first became a candidate, Stefanik kept her distance. She now is one of his staunchest advocates in Congress. She proudly calls herself Ultra MAGA. Other voters have noted an evolution, too, like St. Lawrence County farmer Russ Finley.
There you go.
In 2018, he launched a quixotic primary challenge against Stefanik, labeling her a Republican in name only. Now he's a believer.
Over the course of time, she had the chance to evolve to the more conservative position that she's in now and stronger position.
Would you describe her as a rhino anymore?
No. Once President Trump got in, it really opened people's eyes to say we need a fighter.
Stefanik's turn toward Trumpism mirrors the evolution of her North Country district. In the 5 years before Stefanik was elected in 2014, Democrat Bill Owens was the congressman here. Counties like St. Lawrence and Franklin voted for Barack Obama in 2012, then swung dramatically to Trump in 2016 and 2020, part of a tectonic shift of voters in largely white, rural areas across the country.
I think it shows that President Trump and the Make America Great movement has really expanded today's Republican Party. People who felt that they've been left behind by the status quo in Washington.
The massive, newly drawn 21st District stretches from the outskirts of Albany, across the Adirondacks, edging along Vermont and Canada. I spoke with voters in communities from Ogdensburg to Saranac Lake and Malone to Cobleskill. Stefanik is popular here.
Elise is someone we can trust and someone that we can rely on.
I like the freedoms that she stands for. I like that she's not overbearing.
Traveling across the district, I found many Stefanik detractors as well, who were not shy about sharing their opinions. Many of them arguing that, yes, she has changed, but not for the better. Take Christine Leo, who I met over eggs and toast in Messina. A Democrat, Leo says she once voted for Stefanik.
I did like her in the beginning, but when Trump became president, she became such a Trump follower that she acts like him now. And it kind of turned me off her.
Others see Stefanik as putting her pursuit of power first and foremost.
When the Republican Party was more of a governing party, she was part of that. And that now has become more of an authoritarian party, she's part of that.
I think she's more interested in the power that she can get and moving up in the Republican Party than she is representing the people.
Asked what she's accomplished in Congress, Stefanik cites her work securing funding for rural hospitals in Fort Drum, pushing to reopen the northern border as the pandemic eased, and updating the North American Free Trade Agreement. In Washington, though, it's her political moves that have people talking. Last year, Republican House members voted to replace Congresswoman Liz Cheney with Stefanik as GOP conference chair, in part because of her allegiance to Trump. Her new role will boost her clout in the House if Republicans regain the majority in November. Asked if they think she's evolved, her Republican colleagues on Capitol Hill say she's reflecting her voters.
We have to represent our constituents' viewpoints and values, and that's what she's doing, that's what I'm doing.
This is how Stefanik answers the question. Do you think you've changed at all?
No, I've been a hardworking, strong conservative voice since I ran for office. I've always strived to give this district a seat at the table at the highest levels, and I'm going to continue doing that, and I'm not going to apologize for it.
Many voters here seem fine with Stefanik's new role as a fierce Trump warrior. Political handicappers rate her a solid favorite to win re-election.